Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Welcome back to Cities on the Frontline Speaker Series. I've missed saying that, and I hope you've missed hearing it and being with us here on the Speaker Series. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, my name is Lauren Sorkin, and I'm the Executive Director of the Resilient Cities Network. I'm really pleased to be welcoming everyone back in 2021 to Cities on the Frontline, our speaker series that we co-host with the World Bank. As an American, I feel incredibly energized today to be back with this community while back at home, a new administration is starting on a new path of hope. It's my hope that all of you had a very healthy and restful break and that you've come back recharged for the work ahead. As always, please do introduce yourself in the chat. Tonight, we have a session that is very timely, as so many of us have jumped right back into work and our children back into school. We're going to focus our session today on play and leisure and their importance. The mental health crisis for our children and the financial, social, and emotional pressure associated with the COVID-19 pandemic faced by children and families all around the world underlines the need for post-COVID cities to reclaim and integrate places to play in everyday life, beyond the playground. So our speakers tonight will showcase how to invest and create opportunities for a citywide approach for play. Before we get started, I'm going to remind everyone of the ground rules for these sessions. These are sessions that are put together for practitioners, for cities, and for experts and partners who are there to support cities. So they are not on the record. If you are on this call from the media and you'd like to use any of the material you hear tonight for external release, please contact us and we will put you in touch with the speakers for their permission. We will also be using the Q&A function for the question and answer session tonight. So please enter your questions in the chat function that you find at the bottom of your screen. Last but not least, I will add that all of the session materials, the presentations, as well as a video recording of tonight's session will be made available on our Cities on the Frontline page of the Resilient Cities Network website. So you'll be able to access the materials for the time to come. And with that, let me turn it over to Francis Cassier from the World Bank to introduce our speakers for tonight.
Thank you, Lauren. Thank you very much. It's great to be back. Happy New Year, everyone. Hopefully you had some time to recharge. The circumstances are still difficult, but it is important to take the time. For those who are new, as indicated, Lauren, my name is Francis Cassier. I'm the practice manager of the Urban Disaster Risk Management Land and Geospatial Program of the World Bank in the East Asia region. And today we have again, a fascinating and very exciting topic, which I think is highly relevant to the current context. We're going to look at playful cities, why cities need play and placemaking to foster children's well-being and city resilience. We have three speakers. To set the scene, we'll have Louise Thivant Johannsen, who's from the Child Friendly City Alliance, and a child participation specialist. She's also working with UNICEF and other groups. We'll then have a case study, one city that's really applying this concept and trying to make them real, which is the city of Tirana. And we're very lucky to have the deputy mayor of Tirana, Anuela Ristani, who will present the case study. We'll then have some reflection from an expert, from Hans Karssenberg, who's from Placemaking, another NGO that focuses on the well-being of children. We'll then hopefully have time for Q&A. And as Lauren said, please use the chat function in the WebEx. We'll try to pick the most relevant question one at a time. As she said, everything is recorded. So you'll get the presentation at the end probably by Monday online. If you want to quote some of the material, please do not hesitate to contact us. So I'll pass the floor to Louise. Louise, the floor is yours.
much, Francis. And perhaps just to clarify, I work with UNICEF and I'm the Child Friendly Cities Initiative Advisor, but everything's called Child Friendly these days. So, right, I'm very happy to be here with you today and talk a little bit about why we're so keen on the play agenda and why we're very keen about it now. And you might also wonder why, amid a global pandemic, we want to talk to you about the importance of play. Because one can admittedly argue that city stakeholders have far more important things to do as we prepare for the second and third wave of the pandemic than to discuss how we can increase play opportunities and spaces for children. After all, and I think as we all know, an estimated 100 million people are likely to fall into poverty due to the impact of the pandemic, with as many as 49 million falling into extreme poverty. These are devastating figures. The thing is, we will argue that we can't afford not to talk about play. As the former and much quoted mayor of Bogota has put it, Enrique Peñalosa called children a kind of indicator species of the well-being of cities. So in other words, when we build cities fit for children, we build cities fit for everyone. The question then is, how can we how can investing in play help us rebuild more sustainable and resilient cities in the midst and the aftermath of COVID-19? Next slide, please. Access to play and leisure is not only the right of every child, but it is also crucial for their development. Concretely, science demonstrates that play, sports, and recreation have immediate and long-term impact on the child's healthy development. It prevents smoking, use of drug, and disease across all age groups. It also reduces stress and depression, just as it promotes the development of motor skills and improves confidence and self-esteem. It further improves learning and academic performance and therefore functions as a catalyst for economic development. Enabling ample opportunities for play at home, in school, across the city, and in the broader community increases coping and resilience in a moment of transition, just as it contributes to community cohesion, which is ever more important now. Next slide, please. COVID-19 has presented us with an unprecedented global crisis. But I think it's important that we look at it in this way. There is no crisis without opportunities. The pandemic presents, the way we see it, an opportunity to reimagine a society-wide reform and for shifting the way we function and we plan our cities towards a new urban paradigm. So how can we do that? We can do that by building on what we've learned from the crisis and also the many years before. From the pandemic, we've learned that lack of health has both immediate and long-term impact on children's development, mental health, and well-being, which, if not addressed, will impact jobs, economies, and everyone's future in the long term. We face a major risk of losing our cognitive capital if we don't act now. This is why we cannot afford not to make play a priority. This is why we cannot afford not to invest in children. Concretely, we've learned that we need to identify and invest in play solutions that are innovative, cost-efficient, and high impact. We've also learned that we must factor in the global climate crisis that steadily deteriorates while many of us are occupied with responding to the pandemic. Play solutions must therefore be environment-friendly and sustainable. We have also learned that play solutions must be developed together with those they serve, and those are children and young people. Finally, and more than anything, we've learned that to lift this burden and to face this challenge, we need to face it together. Through multiple stakeholder and cross-sectorial partnerships, can we join forces and bring together our know-how and our skills and jointly identify solutions to rethink our future societies and cities. The Realplay Coalition envisions promoting play at the heart of building back better through establishing political commitment and cross-sectorial partnerships with local governments and other local stakeholders, including placemakers, civil society organizations, children, young people, families, and many more. Unpacking the economic and social value of play, leisure, and family time represents for cities is also going to be one of our core priorities. Another is raising awareness and advocating for action with partners and cities globally and across different socio-economic contexts. And finally, identifying and promoting innovative, cost-efficient, high-impact, sustainable, and environment-friendly solutions that are co-created with children and young people. While the international community, alongside national and local governments and placemakers, work towards curbing the disturbing trends, we can recreate a real and imminent solution to strengthening resilient communities. And we must do so together and do it now. Next slide, please. One of our recent efforts to showcase the value of play has been the Realplay City Challenge. The Realplay Coalition and PlacemakingX launched the challenge to address a pressing need to reclaim opportunities and places for children to play. The innovative work of Tirana and other cities and placemakers who participated in the Realplay Challenge demonstrate that play can and should be part of building back better, resilient, sustainable, and child-friendly communities. We're delighted that the winner of the competition, Deputy Mayor Anuela, joined us today from the city of Tirana, Albania, to share with us her experience. Thank you.
Hello, am I good to go?
Good to go, Anuela. We're happy to have you.
Hi, so good to be here. It's amazing to talk about this fun stuff in times that are not so much fun. It's such an honor for us to be displayed at such a respected audience and really among people who do make change. If I can have the option of sharing my presentation, I would love to do that so that I don't say half of the word. Next slide, and we can start immediately. Thank you. Okay. Great. So I'm assuming everybody's looking at this. So how do you make play happen? First of all, we have to do it because we are such a young city. We are young in all ways possible. We are young in terms of being only 100 years old as capital. Before that, we were just a village. But just to give you guys some sort of a sense where we're located, so everybody thinks of us being really far away. We're actually just next to Italy and Greece. So just to give you a little bit of a context of a playful country overall. And so for a long time, we're stuck between different influences of 5 years after, and then somewhere in, somewhere out of the communist bloc, and never within the European Union, whatever that will mean before or after Brexit. But this is just to show you guys of how small we were. This is basically the whole map of Tirana 100 years ago, and it's just one neighborhood. And we grew into, this is a picture taken from 89, satellite picture. Then this is 99. Then this is 2009. And this is 2019. So just from the satellite, you can just see how much of a shock we went through throughout all these years, because the population grew immediately after the fall of Berlin Wall to some place that was only 200,000 inhabitants to would be a good idea to start from. Before, this would be when we were doing communism, nobody was allowed to have private cars. So basically the whole square would be transformed into a playground with not much toys, because obviously during scarce times there was not much play. But I remember when I was a kid playing in this space, because it was fully pedestrian. You can, not because it was pedestrian, but because there were no cars. So you could spot maybe 1 or 2 buses there around, but nothing more than that. But because, you know, communism fell and capitalism came over, and, you know, people were allowed to own cars, basically. So this was a little bit of the chaos that was in the center before we got into the office. And we counted at one point there were 150,000 cars going roundabout, trying to figure out their destination. Not very friendly, not very playful space to start with. So we thought, you know what? We start from this. Let's pedestrianize this whole square. Let's turn it into a play for all. So not necessarily a playground. This is the first day where we opened the gate. And every time I see this picture, I get a little bit emotional because it just shows how much thirst for space people were seeking. And, you know, transforming and finding so much desire for people to be open in the public immediately after the gates open it's a human right, basically. It's not just something that we talk about. It's not just a project that goes from one table to the next. It's basically what we're here for as city managers. This was the party we had in the evening, and then this is commonly how the square is used. Half of it is a public garden where people can spend their time freely, and this is right downtown. So just to give you guys a sense of what it is. But mostly, it's a free space to play. It has this water features, and it has so much safe and nice surroundings for everybody who wants to go out with their bikes, with their rollerblades, and they can do anything they want, basically. So there's a lot of gadgets. This is in a normal afternoon in the summer when there was the COVID restrictions, and I'd love to show you guys this picture because otherwise it would be really funny and empty. But there's nothing happening. It's just a normal afternoon. Because when something is happening, it looks like this. So this was when we used to have concerts, and you can transform it in any other way possible, and this is really when the party goes on. Just to show you guys a space that was meant to be central, but it's actually a playground for all. The next space I wanted to show you, this is, again, a space from my childhood. It was concerts for all schools. So all kids could go and have a stage because it's an outside theater. But, you know, it was run down. A lot of years passed by. We transformed it into this. And why this is important is because it was the only space where we could still hold events during COVID. So the picture that you see here is actually a picture that was taken during the restrictions. And you can see that people are sparsely spread out so they can safely attend an event in the open air. And during last summer, 2020, when I'm sure none of, the cities could hold events or gather people, this was a good venue to hold concerts because it would be a space where we could still do that. So schools had their last year performances. They could still do it with smaller crowds. But again, there was space for graduation. We had a few graduations for kindergarten. So it's still, you could use that as a space for all. I'm trying to go to the next slide, if I can. Okay, just a second. Yeah, I think I can. You guys is the playground. So in a city of 1 million people, obviously the average age is very, very low. You will be surprised to find out that there were 0 playgrounds. So yeah, nobody had thought of playgrounds. They thought, kids find their own way to play. So nobody had thought about that. So our commitment was we have to do whatever it takes, but we'll have one playground for each month we're in the office. So we're happy that it started from one central major playground that you see in the slide, and it became so many. And what we did with them was we found every idle space that you could find out in a neighborhood, in a block of apartments, a block of buildings, any idle space practically, and we transformed it into a playground. Now, a lot of this stuff is done with there's a lot of CSR money out there, and we said, if you want to do something for the city, we're going to do the groundwork, you guys buy the equipment. And it turns out that in 56 months, we managed to have 56 playgrounds in a city that had none. I'd love to show you some of the spaces like they were before and how they were transformed after. But there's so many of them that any place that you could see that was not used, like such as a sporadic parking lot, which looked very sad, was transformed into a playground and a sports area. Why is this important? It's not just for kids. Every time we talk about play, we're not necessarily just talking about the kids and their right to be out there and to grow in a healthy way. What we found out is when we ran for election, then we asked people, what has changed your life the most in these years? We thought, major projects like, Karssenberg Square or like projects that required millions and millions of investments would basically be the game changers. It turned out that by far, and by absolute far, the stuff that changed their lives the most was the transformation in their neighborhood and these small parks for kids to play and for parents to interact. Why is this important? It's not just because kids are playing, but because the community is built. When you go downstairs and you have your child or you have your grandson or granddaughter and you're looking after them, then you're going to share that experience with other parents or other grandparents or caretakers, and there's going to be an interaction. This is both important in terms of creating community and safety for the communities, but also it is mentally, it's beneficial for people to have a space and safe way to interact with the others at their doorstep practically. So something that was completely counterintuitive turned out to be exactly what really mattered and what people were looking for overall. So 56 playgrounds in 56 months, that is the map where they're spread out. And the next stuff I want to show you, which we're really proud of, is our bike lanes. And you can see this picture with the little kids. What we do, we have this really nice program where we teach kids as young as 3 to ride a bike. And they start riding a bike in their schools or kindergartens. And then what we do is we basically take them out on the protected bike lanes. And this is not just to teach the kids on how to go around on a bike in the city, but this is the biggest education tool we have for drivers and for people who drive cars. Because, if you see a small child pedaling just beside your Mercedes, you're obviously going to be a lot more careful. You're obviously going to think, well, maybe I should try that sometime. It seems like they're having a lot of fun. And it works both in being responsible in terms of driving, in terms of occupying space in the city. It also teaches them that occupying that bike lane through parking your car is not the best and nicest way to deal with it. But it also raises the awareness of an alternative way of transport, because if it's safe enough for kids that are as young as 3, and it should be safe enough for everybody, basically. So I don't want to skip these pictures because they're really cute. And you can see we do this at all times of the year, so not just when it's good weather, but also when it's raining. And we do this also in terms of all the transformation, all the ways of transporting yourself within the city. So you don't necessarily have to buy a car. If you are a pedestrian, what kind of respect is the city showing you? What kind of respect are we showing through infrastructure that we built? These playful crossroads are one safe way to make it known that this is a pedestrian path. This is a
Sorry, we see that the PowerPoint has gone off. We're going to try to reshare it. Just give us a moment. Okay, I think we are coming back. I think it's quite incredible, and there have been a number of comments here in the chat, folks who have been to Tirana, who have seen this as a major transformation, and some questions that are already coming up, which we'll come to in the Q&A. But let's get back to Anuela so that she can finish her presentation. Anuela, can you hear us?
Hi, Lauren. This is Esmeralda from Anuela's office as well. She's trying to join again.
Okay.
Nonetheless, I don't know if you have the PDF version of the presentation, maybe, which she probably will share in a second. Or I can share it.
We've got the presentation back up, so no worries at all. We're ready. Esmeralda, maybe while we have you here, there's a question here about Tirana that's asking if anything was done to reduce traffic speed so kids could walk or bike to the playground. Was that part of any policy change in the city?
Yes, I can with some answers like I said. Basically, what we try to do is create as many pedestrian experts for a reason, because before it used to be the biggest roundabout in the region, in Balkans. And then this roundabout was turned into a huge square of 40,000 square meters. So children would usually just go there. There is also some slides that were missing from the presentation because it was slow. It's about all the kilometers of bike lanes we've done. So we did this amazing study with EBRD of how to turn in the city with a minimum grid of bike lanes. And from 0 bike lanes, we had 46 kilometers of bike lanes that usually were surrounded by trees or green corridors, as we call them. So children would be able to bike there. And one of the coolest pictures that you're also going to see in the end of the presentation is one initiative that we've taken with all the kindergartens to give them biking lessons. If you can go a few slides down, we've given them biking lessons since a young age because we thought this way they could be used with, how bike lanes work and how the signaling in the bike lanes work and so forth.
It's just inspiring just to watch the pictures. We almost need no comments.
I'm so sorry. I got completely kicked out of the system. I hope I didn't overwhelm everybody with the pictures.
No, it's great to have you back. So we were Esmeralda gave us a few explanations, but why don't you take over where you started?
I apologize. I'm not even sure where I left it off, but I was doing the bikes at the point where I realized nobody was listening.
we actually heard that you were talking about the people driving their Mercedes and being a bit more careful when they see children on their bicycles.
On the slides of the bikes. Okay, good. I'm sorry. This is if I could share it again, it'll be great. If somebody could give me that option. Oh, thank you so much. And I apologize, but obviously we're still on the process of, learning how to do this stuff with all the connection problems.
Oh, there they are. We can see them.
Yeah, good. Just let me just make this big. Okay. Yeah. I just wanted to show you guys how this is important to educate them, not just the drivers, but also parents. Because when you have an enthusiastic kid who says, I played with my friends today, we went on a bike in the park, and then, we rode our own bikes and we had a lot of fun. Then it's just a hint for parents to do the same thing during the weekend, whenever their time is on. So it's just, a good way to really show good spirit. That was actually my last slide, so I hope you guys did catch the gist of it. I apologize for this, but I'd really be happy to catch some questions and respond to them in an uninterrupted way, rather.
Thank you, Anuela. It's great to have you. We're going to go quickly to Hans then, and then hopefully have time for questions.
Thank you, Francis. Thank you very much for organizing this great event at the start of the year, and I think it's a good moment to focus on children and on this amazing story we just heard from Anuela. Thank you, Anuela, for your super inspiring talk. To quickly introduce myself, I'm a board member of the global organization called PlacemakingX. It's a global organization for placemakers across the world. We see the movement coming up in continents everywhere. And in daily life, I'm also a practitioner in urban planning, trying to weave placemaking, child-friendly placemaking into the day-to-day neighborhood development in the Netherlands. For those of you maybe for who this term placemaking is new, by placemaking we're working on the quality of the public space. And I think we've just seen a wonderful example of what that can bring, not only in terms of design, but also in terms of the activities and the communities. Placemaking is turning public spaces into places where people want to be, from space to place, with and for the community, carried with the community. And then, of course, today we're talking about child-friendly placemaking, which is doing this especially for and with children and their caregivers. Now, I first would like to give a brief reflection on Tirana on behalf of the jury. And we're super happy to have this collaboration between PlacemakingX and the Realplay Coalition, which UNICEF is a part of. We heard Louise from. And we had a wonderful, wonderful jury, and we were super happy to have Lauren, who opened this session in the jury as part of the HighLevel Jury, because we organized this challenge where we invited cities and invited placemakers, so both the top-down and the bottom-up approach, to come up with the best they've done in the past years when it comes to child-friendly placemaking. And we're incredibly I would say beyond happy that Tirana won. And I think if you just heard Anuela speak, then you can fully imagine why. The amazing story of what you can do in 5 years' time, the transformation you can make. I was in Tirana myself 8 years ago, and seeing the pictures now in Anuela's presentation, it's transformed into a different city in 5 years' time. It's a totally integrated approach. It includes all parts of the city, so it doesn't only focus on the city center, but it also goes out to the neighborhoods on the outskirts more, and it impacts on both schools, kindergartens, as well as city space. So it takes this idea of play beyond the playground. So there's a system-based approach for economic resilience, and it's replicable. It's replicable to other cities, and we'd love to have the Q&A afterwards to hear your ideas on this. So these were some of the reasons why the jury, the independent jury, selected Tirana to be the winner of the Realplay City Challenge. This was the first edition that we organized this Realplay City Challenge to raise more awareness. And we had also placemakers, community organizations win besides the cities. So maybe a couple of reflections. If I step away a little bit, then what we see and why we organize this challenge this way is that in order to create a playful city, you need the city government on board. You need the top-down multi-year strategic approach. I think Tirana is a wonderful example of what you can achieve. But you also need the bottom-up initiatives, the energy from the communities, and I think Anuela can speak much more about how there was one of the questions in the chat box I saw about how the community was engaged, how they engaged in participatory budgeting as well. So there's much more to tell there. So top-down and bottom-up together, working on the same goal, and of course we're now all planning the after-COVID city. Public space can be an important vehicle for recovery after COVID, and focusing on playful placemaking is a lightweight way to tap into the energy of communities and really start transforming the city again after we come out of COVID everywhere. And this works in a lot of different contexts. I mean, the winners were really from all continents. So it's not just only the Western continents. We actually had more winners in terms of the placemakers from Latin America, from Africa, and from the Middle East. And the intriguing thing, that's something to discuss here maybe, is that we always find that cities working on their public spaces, they, of course, have highly standardized systems, because the more you standardize your approach to maintaining and designing public space, the more efficient you can be as a city, right? And then you have these bottom-up initiatives who are more or less shaping each time a unique place one at a time. So it means for cities to open up to those placemaking initiatives that you have to start making exceptions to the rule. And that's where the bottom-up and top-down are challenging each other to work together and to open up the city systems. And especially important with children, because children, of course, are not just some kind of target group. they require a totally different approach to engage them in the urban planning process. But I can tell from experience, once you do that, you're going to get amazing results because children are so imaginative. Their caregivers have so much information. If you combine it with the knowledge of your urban planners, your designers, then great things can happen. Now, I wanted to close off my reflections with the example of one of the resilient cities in the network, San Francisco, because they have a very impressive achievement in the past years on how to work together as a system, as the standardized system, with all those local initiatives. Of course, San Francisco is a city where a lot of these bottom-up initiatives were already taking place. One of the most famous examples are Rebar, the group of artists who started taking parking places and turning them into 2x5 meter pocket parks called parking, and from that grew the parking day, and from that grew the idea of parklets, more permanent parking spaces turned into public spaces for people to sit down, a small park, and to make the city more green, right? That idea originated in San Francisco and then spread across the world. I guess many of your cities will have parklets nowadays. So San Francisco already had this creativity in the city. And we have this wonderful person in our network, Robin Abad, who on the side of the city of San Francisco started looking through the system. How can we open up the system to work together with these local initiatives? So how can we lower the barriers to participation, facilitate greater equity in the projects in all neighborhoods, and enable more activation of public space that is frequent, diverse, and free to the public to use? They started streamlining the entire permitting process. They helped to create self-financing opportunities for the bottom-up initiatives to better support the long-term stewardship of the places. And they defined parameters for the operations, permit terms, and enforcement thresholds. So if you want to open up your system, I guess the bottom line is, and San Francisco is a wonderful case to perhaps once ask more about this, that really showcases what you can achieve once you open up your own system to work together with all those local initiatives. And by the way, they're also providing game rules for how to do that, manuals, and measuring tools for the impact of those initiatives. So with that, I think it's good to go to the Q&A, and we hope you got a taste of what the challenge, the Realplay City Challenge, has brought. And we hope to be able to turn this, of course, into a more biannual event. To end with right now, I would like to say that, yes, Tirana was the city winner, and we had 3 special mentions: the city of Zapopan in Mexico, the city of Lima, and the city of Istanbul. And then we also had bottom-up initiatives, the placemaking initiatives. BRAC was one of the 3 winners there, from Bangladesh, Tanzania, and Uganda. Playful Learning Landscapes Action Network in Philadelphia. Noodle cards implemented in Beirut, but these are all scalable. These can all be used in all different contexts in all your cities. And then 3 special mentions: the participatory spatial intervention in Lebanon, the Play Africa in Johannesburg, and Tamaulipas in Mexico City. And I think if you listen to the amount of cities being present there, you can really see that you can do this in every context. And we're super happy to see this happening and showcase all these examples. So thank you with that, and back to you, Francis.
Thank you, Hans. I think I'll give Lauren the honor of the first question, and then I'll come after her.
Thanks, Francis. And I do also want to say it was such a pleasure being on the judging panel for the Play Challenge, because even though Hans didn't give the instructions that we should actually combine economist and planning expertise with child vision, I did ask my 2 daughters to sit next to me and to watch the short videos of the different cities. And so they voted with me. So we did that combined judging, just so you know, that was involved in my ranking. And it was the one part of my work that they enjoyed the most during the entire COVID time, not only because I told them that Lego was a part of it, which is like the equivalent of saying a rock star is coming to the house, but it was very, very enjoyable. And for those who would like to learn more, there's actually a fantastic website, Hans, that I hope you don't mind my mentioning, but Cities at Eye Level Stories that you have that gives many, many examples from around the world. And so it's actually with that transition that I want to ask the first question, which comes through and asks about scale. And so there's a lot of interest in what was presented, not surprisingly, from you, Anuela, in Tirana. And so our participants are wondering, how can they apply what you've done at scale? Is this something that bigger cities can do? How is it possible to really make the space to scale up play areas and bike lanes and to finance that?
Okay, so there's issues. The first issue is the space, how we find the space. If you're looking at bike lanes and how cities have done bike lanes and all this cacophony of, you know, people saying on the streets and stuff like that, none of the bike lanes that you see in cities that are being set up right now were done in a space where cars were walking. They were only done in spaces where cars were parked as a rule. So that space was always there. It's just a choice of you using it for bikes or using it to give pleasure to these metallic boxes, you know? It's the same way. I always give people this example. My parents, they are retired. They don't own a car. So how about them occupying 10 meters square on the side of the street, planting their own garden? Like, would you see that as something normal in the city? You say, oh, wow, who gave them that right? But who gave the cars the right to occupy the same space? So we only removed parking spots on the street. If you're buying a car, good for you, but you also should think of the space that goes with it and plan for that as well, and not take it from the street that's for everyone. So that's one for the bike lanes. We occupied community space, and this is where community gets involved. So I keep doing this all the time as we speak right now. We are doing a park beside a school that is next to a apartment building, a huge apartment building. We sat together with the parents of the people in this apartment building, who in most cases are the same parents that take their kids to the school that is next to their door. And we said, you know, guys, this space for you right now is for you to park your car right next to the door. We are offering you a space a block away. We are occupying all this area so no cars can go by. So when your kids are going out of the school, they can actually wait for you in a park. And there's no cars passing by, so you know you're completely safe. Even they're walking by themselves, they don't have to hold their hand all the time. So when we first started this, the people who are responsible for that area, which is kind of like our small mayors, mini mayors, they said, no, people are so in love with their car. They're never going to let you close the street up and then build something else, you know, in there. They're going to be freaking out. You're going to have protests. So, well, you know, we just show them what we want to do. And when you show them that this is not just because I feel like doing it, it's just because it makes, you know, a lot of sense, then they were very willing to give up that space. So, you know, they might just walk like 3 blocks now to park their car because that space was something that, you know, if they give it back to their kids was a lot better than if they kept it for their car. So that's how you solve the space issue. Every space is a negotiation. So there's no space that is being offered to you right there and then says, oh, make a playground out of me. So all of that works, you know, it's day-to-day work. How do you finance the equipment? I mentioned it, and I wrote my answer in here as well. We said any CSR money that comes for the city, any donation, breaks or whatever, make it playground equipment. So happy to share that. We commercialize, you know, their name, however they want. You know, when we do an opening, they're there. We say, oh, thank you to such and such bank and thank you to such and such company because they donated the equipment. And all the works on the ground are done by our companies, so by our workers who work throughout the city, our maintenance works.
I don't know if, thank you.
Did I get kicked out of them?
No, you're still
or
there.
Okay?
I'm a bit annoyed because you answered all the questions that I had in mind already. was going to ask Hans and Louise if they wanted to add on this particular topic, and then I'll come with a much harder question so that we don't get all the answer in just one intervention. Hans, do you want to add to this, or?
No, I just wanted to point out there's a lot of learning already on how to develop these citywide frameworks. And there are resources on the website of the Realplay City Challenge.org on how to do this, on how to set this up as a city, and of course the inspiration from other cities. And we see this happening both in relatively smaller cities as well as in megalopolises. So the size doesn't really matter. It's a matter of organization and using the right frameworks and tapping into that knowledge. So please know that there's a lot of knowledge available.
I would even add, before giving you the floor, that at the World Bank we do a lot of work with mega cities in trying to help them do inventory of their public assets, their park, their buildings, and it's fascinating to see how many assets are unused or unmaintained. And when you do an inventory, simply you discover plenty of space, plenty of parkings, plenty of area that could be redeveloped and actually redeveloped, generating revenue, doing part of it as a revenue-making activity, and then the other one as a park. And so there are many opportunities. And paradoxically, the bigger the city, the more you have those opportunities, because it's so hard for large cities to be on top of everything they own and that's under their purview. Louise, if you're still there, I want to make sure you have an opportunity to answer.
Yes. No, I could not. I think like these points that Anuela made, I mean, I think they're just like right on. It's always a negotiation. Space is used most places. And so you really need to work with what you have. And I think COVID has just been such about speaking about COVID as an opportunity. So it's an incredible example of how cities, they just went ahead with this. And you know, they had people out of the streets. There weren't really that many people to object, like, and exactly like parking's being turned into that. They rechanged their parks. But I think essentially it's just you know, shopping malls, they're there already. They're not necessarily super child friendly. It could be walking streets, like create play opportunities in the shopping street. The very famous one is, of course, like simply close down the street and have this space in the middle where it can be interactive and engaging for children as their parents, they stroll along. So, and I really think back to Hans's point that like working with identifying children, they're so innovative. They are not like caught up in all of these considerations that we are, and they don't necessarily look for very expensive solutions. And one of the things that we have great experience with is just like co-creating spaces for children. There are even cities where children, it's mandatory to ask their opinion before a new public space is kind of being put into reuse. And by way of example, one of UNICEF's child-friendly cities, we have a city that is extremely wealthy. And they wanted to do something great for children and found this beautiful hill and everything was perfect. And then we asked them, like, have you asked children about this? And it's like, we have not actually, but we will do that. We think that's great. They went back to the children and said, let's have a talk about it. And the children, they hated the idea. It's like, no, we never go to that area. It's too far away. It's not on our daily route. And it was like, oh my, like, what are we going to do then? It's like, well, what do you want? And what the children really wanted, the adults would never have thought about this. They have identified an old parking area, like several floors, and it was like the adults was like, I mean, why would you want that? And they were just like, well, it's close to where we live, it's on our way from school, there's lighting, there are toilets, and there are all of these things. And so in the end, what they did, instead of investing in this like massive play park area, they reused an old parking lot, and it proved to be very, very cheap. So I think that is just one example of how it's so important to kind of like have this conversation with the people you're actually creating these opportunities for.
If I may build on that, I think negotiating with the community is very often very important to start with small interventions. So this is in placemaking, we call this tactical urbanism or quicker, lighter, cheaper. To start with small interventions that you can say, well, if you look, it's only temporary, and if it's not a success, then fine, we take it out again. So that kind of lowers the threshold of the resistance that may be there and gives people an experience of what a place could be like. So taking away parking spaces is often heavily debated, but once people start to see the qualities they get in return, then their eyes open up and they're open to more. And if you then have that first, if it's not a success, fine, then you can turn it back again. If it turns out to be a success, then you can build on that and start to make bigger investments together with the community. So I think it's also a matter of finding the right tactics to do this.
Thank you, Hans, Louise, and Anuela. Lauren, do you want to jump in? Otherwise, I have a question that moves us away from the fun of playing with children and much more towards the financing of these activities.
Can certainly ask the question about finance. I was also curious about during COVID-19, in terms of how stressed people felt, were there different approaches you took in the public spaces to deal with that? I know that might be a big question, but I'm curious how that played out in Tirana and also, Louise and Hans, what you've seen happening around the world.
Again, you did. So for us, COVID was a sort of a blessing in disguise, because some of the things that we had done before turned out to be so much more useful during COVID than they had ever been before. So for example, I'll just show you an example. I'll show you the playgrounds, and then most of the users of the playgrounds would be either small children or their grandparents. And because everybody was under lockdown, finally the parents got to see, oh my gosh, this is great. I can just go down and have a chat with my buddy, and our kids are playing because we can go nowhere else. I mean, isn't it amazing? But all of this working age people, people that are just running from A to B to Z to whatever, they had never been caretakers, so they had never spent their whole day probably with their own children. And now they did, when there was homeschooling and stuff like that. And what to do with all this time, what to do with all this care? They have to be outside. They cannot be stuck on their phones during the weekend, and you cannot take them anywhere else. And so now they had a space downstairs where they could actually play in a semi-safe way, but safer than anywhere else. Basically, if they could go out. So really, it was a confirmation of what we had been doing was right, but it was also a great opportunity to do more. And I love it that it was mentioned here because there were not a lot of people on the street. So what we did was we extended sidewalks a lot more than there were before. We occupied the pop-up bike lanes. So the parking space that I was telling you about on the street was now empty because nobody was going to work. And so we occupied that, first of all, with just put bars so that nobody would park there. And then we started putting the poles and then paving the street. But we first occupied, and we did that for kilometers and kilometers in a very, very short time compared to what we had been doing before. And so that the giving a lot more space to people who are walking as the safest way to basically commute, and to people who are biking, those were some of the things that we did a lot faster. The other thing that we did that we had been as a space for kids to play out of school hours. So we have there's this sports associations that get them with a very symbolic rent, so only for maintenance costs. And they have these courses of, they teach kids how to play basketball or how to play volleyball and all sorts of gymnastics, all sorts of things. And so because they couldn't do it inside, we gave them space outside. So, public parks that were just parks, they were being offered to these societies, sport societies, to be used for their own activities. And all these spaces of public parks were moved from indoor gyms to the outdoor gyms. So you had people play karate next to, a business building when you're having meetings. But again, that's entertaining as well. So, but those were some of the things that we did. I can tell you a lot of other things that are just coming now, but just to give you a taste of, what I'm doing.
What we saw under COVID, of course, is that everybody realized more and more the importance of having these amenities in their own neighborhoods. And I think Anuela already hinted at that. the process of placemaking is not just about creating better physical places. It's also very much about creating the communities that activate them and working with the communities and creating the community networks for people to interact and meet. So placemaking has a physical capital as a result, but also a lot of social capital. And I think we've come to realize in the COVID times how important it is to have that social capital in your own neighborhood, because who is going to do the shopping for you if you're restricted to home? So placemaking for recovery is really an important theme for us, coming out of COVID slowly, hopefully, right? And tapping into the energy of communities is a great way to make the most of your city-wide budgets, I would say, to multiply that energy that you bring as a city with the energy of the communities and the placemakers.
And I think one of the really great things that have come out of COVID, because there are some, and it is this recognition that this really matters. Before, I feel in many ways, despite kind of like the very widespread commitment to play, it hasn't in many ways been amongst urban planners, and it hasn't really kind of like been taken to scale in any way. And I think now we're there. I think COVID has really demonstrated this has a massive, massive impact. As I mentioned, mental health, physical health, but also like the futures of the children. So I think now we have that established. It's generally recognized. And then I think also in the past, there might have been money in some cities, not in others, but adults, they care about fancy looking, nicely designed play solutions. Children, they do not care. Like, they really don't. And as Anuela, I have like from, the work with that Realplay Coalition and like the work we do with child-friendly cities, like so many examples where I live, they just moved the yellow line to create this bike street. In the beginning, like, everyone I knew, they complained about this like yellow line and their parking lots and, one lane was being cut away. And then, they got tired of complaining, and then before the society opened up again, they had bought bikes, and suddenly we saw children biking with their families everywhere, and, pop-up playgrounds, sometimes if you have a bit of a space, it's just installing that basketball ring so children can go down and, do the hoops, with the ball they already have. So the solutions are there, but I think we have a really big responsibility to kind of, because the good practices are out there. I think what we need to do more of is kind of like share these solutions, because I know from my work with cities that they get so much more inspired, compared to impressive urban planning frameworks. That could be a bit much to digest sometimes. But sharing some of these like easy, cost-efficient solutions that can create such a massive impact in the lives of children in the broader communities.
Thank you, Louise. Thank you. I think Hans really summarized it. In this post, or hopefully we'll get to a post-COVID area, it will be fundamental to rebuild communities, and this is really about rebuilding communities. We're getting to the end, unfortunately, of the time imparted. I'm not going to ask my question about finance, but I would encourage everyone on this call to try to reach out to the authorities to look at the recovery package that are being prepared. At the World Bank, we're working hard to make sure that this money goes to greening, goes to climate action, goes to useful intervention, and not to building more a coal power plant and other low-hanging fruit that eventually will prove to be much more costly to society. And rebuilding community is really fundamental, I think, to the recovery. I'm going to pass it on to Lauren. I think, Lauren, you have some announcements, including the following session, but other elements as well. Over to you.
Thank you, Francis. Well, from our city side, with more and more cities really putting the well-being of children first, and as you mentioned, looking at how to accelerate actions and leverage the right expertise to make investments as they recover from COVID-19, we'll be continuing this discussion. So this is just a first step with the Realplay Coalition. So we'll be developing a broader collaboration to deepen understanding about how to build playful cities to enhance urban resilience. And Louise, I'm going to pass it to you for a word, and then I will give the information about the upcoming session.
Great. So this partnership and collaboration, we see that as absolutely crucial to creating playful cities. And we see great potential in working in partnership with the Resilient Cities Network on how we can strengthen evidence, action, impact. And as part of that, we're particularly keen to deep dive on the economic and also the social value that play, family time, and leisure represents for cities. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise, and thanks to everyone for making the time tonight. Thank you, Anuela, for joining us from Tirana. Thank you, Hans, for joining us and for facilitating such a meaningful challenge as well. Thank you, Louise. We will be back in 2 weeks' time with the next session, which is going to be on scaling up climate action. So we're going to hear from cities and also coalition partners who are working alongside cities to help to speed up investments and actions to combat climate change. So hopefully we'll see you online then, and until February, have a very safe and good day or evening ahead. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.